Afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, we got the clarity on lumber tariffs. There is no lumber tariffs. They exempt lumber from the tariffs that are going to be impacted on all nations, all the way around. Everybody all concerned about lumber tariffs, making the business decisions based around this idea of lumber tariffs, and there was none. All right, I kept saying it over and over again. We got to wait and see what it is that's taking place before we can come to this conclusion that there's going to be this major increase to the price of lumber. It didn't happen. And what do we see happening with lumber futures? Tanking. Absolutely tanking today. They're down over 8% as of the start of this video. And I would imagine that we're probably going to see a lot more coming out of it, since the speculation that was going into the idea that there was going to be this huge increase to the cost of lumber, or the price of lumber, due to the impacts of tariffs upon Canadian lumber, it failed to manifest itself. Now, let's think about this for just a minute. How many people made decisions based on the idea that there was going to be this major increase to the price of lumber going into the future? How many lumber yards started increasing their prices? How many different contractors out there were increasing their bids, all based off of an idea that was a complete credible threat? Complete credible threat. I said it over and over again. Many people told me that I had no clue about what it was that I was talking about, how I had no clue about what it was that Donald Trump was attempting to do, and that I had no clue of what was going on within this industry. And what ended up taking place? Nothing. Nothing happened. There is no difference today than there was yesterday or the day before that. The only difference is now the people have come to the understanding that there will be no tariffs on Canadian lumber. The only tariffs that we're going to experience are the ones that we have already experienced in the past, and nobody cared about those. The 14% increase on Canadian lumber that took place back in August, nobody talks about. Nobody has any clue about it. They have no idea what happened to prices after that. And most of the people that look at lumber tariffs, from the history of lumber tariffs, have no idea that they were used to prevent prices from falling further, to protect our domestic suppliers. That's the point of tariffs. Even now, we're finding the situation taking place in which that the demand for lumber is probably going to continue to fall, as the economic activity that's happening out there, especially with the builder sentiment, is in a negative territory. Okay? How is it that you're going to find an increase in lumber demand if you have a downturn in economic activity that's happening out there that's going to put even more pressure on domestic suppliers? You know, this is the fear and uncertainty that they use against the people, and it was obvious. It was so apparent within the lumber industry. You know, I mean, I had so many people asking me what I thought was going to happen. I even just did a consultation call over the weekend with a really good group of guys who were very much concerned about what it was that these tariffs were going to do to the lumber industry, how it's going to impact the lumber. And I kept saying it. We got to wait and see. We don't know what it is. I don't have no idea what it's going to do to the lumber industry if I have no clue about what the actual impact is going to be, if we don't know what the tariff is. Like, you can't put that together until you actually see it. And now that we have it here, it doesn't exist. Boom. Complete imagination. The entire time, everybody lost their mind, and there was nothing there. Literally. You know, as we go into the future, dealing with the situation that we have at hand, many times that I look at some of the articles that I'm reading about what it is that they are doing to these nations as far as reciprocal tariffs or impacting of tariffs, the negotiation is still on the table. Like, we were supposed to get clarity yesterday, and I'm reading about how the last country to negotiate with Donald Trump loses. So what's going on? Are we negotiating, or are we setting these things into motion? Right? Still have no clarity on the situation because we don't know what the real impact is. Oh, we got some talking points about it. You know, here's all these percentages going to these particular countries, but we still don't know what the full impact is going to be after they negotiate. Right? Not a single article that I read seems to take in the consideration of the major problem that we face as being the custodian of the world reserve currency. See how many people out there saying, oh man, we're tired of these countries ripping off the United States and it's unfair and we need to make it fair. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, we need to make this fair? We need to make it fair. Like, other nations out there take their natural resources, their labor, their energy, their production, send it to the United States, and the United States sends them an empty paper promise. And it's unfair to us? Like, we get to consume the production of the world, and in exchange, we hand them a paper promise, a superficial paper promise to pay into the future. And somehow they're taking advantage of us. I mean, I find this very odd. Like, I don't know how many people out there want to end that sort of thing, but when somebody else is producing and sending you their production and you're sending them an empty paper promise, and we're the ones who are being taken advantage of, I mean, say it out loud to yourself and then try and understand what's happening. Very few people out there take into consideration that there's something called Triffin's dilemma. Nobody. All these, I type in Triffin's dilemma into the Google search and look at the news feeds that incorporate the idea of Triffin's dilemma into what's going on now, and I find 0 articles. Nobody. Literally nobody. Even now, we'll probably have people who are watching this video right now asking, what the hell is Triffin's dilemma? See, people don't seem to take into consideration that when you are the custodian, when you are the one who is responsible for the world reserve currency and supplying the world with that currency, how do you think it is that the United States, being the custodian of that world reserve currency, actually gets that currency out to the world? See, there's dollar-denominated debt that exists out there around the globe. It demands dollars to be paid. These are debts that don't have anything to do with the United States. Not a single thing. Not our banks, not our government, not our people, nothing. But yet they are debts that are due in dollars. These debts exist outside of the United States. When it comes time for those debts to come due, they need to acquire dollars. How do you get those dollars? How do they get the dollars? The easiest way is to sell something to the United States. And the easiest way for the United States to get their dollars out there to the world is to run trade deficits. That's Triffin's dilemma. How do you get the dollars out to the world? If you don't, the dollar will strengthen. Some people say that's a good thing. That's a good thing to have the dollar strengthen. I would agree. All right? If your dollar strengthens, you can buy more of the foreign production. But what can happen is that the foreign buyers, the foreign consumers of our domestic products or our domestic produced products, they become very expensive. And your domestic manufacturers who used to send production out of the United States, they suffer the consequences from that. A strengthening dollar damages the United States manufacturing to the foreign buyers. The production that we produce and send out of the United States becomes more difficult. It's a strain on our manufacturing when that takes place. You know, I think about the timber industry because here, let me back it up, right? Because I'm in the lumber industry. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I keep an eye on forestry products and what's going on within that particular industry. You know, there was this talk about opening up federal lands for timber production. Like, we're going to produce more timber. We need more trees to be cut down. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I live along the Columbia River right here, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Oregon, which is, I still believe, the #1 lumber producing state in the nation. And we send an insane amount of raw logs, not sawed into boards, raw logs. These are trees, cut down, limbed. That's as far as it goes on the production of that, and they are sent overseas. Now, if you have trouble with your foreign buyers of your domestic product, which trees, the forestry, the raw logs, the timber, that's an agricultural product that we send out of the United States. If the dollar gets stronger and that export market gets hurt, do you think that forestry industry is going to be booming? Why would you want to cut down more trees if the buyer of trees is giving you the finger, saying, nah, keep your trees? See, this is the problem that I think a lot of people face is they say, oh man, we need more lumber, just cut down some more trees. No, that's not the way it goes down. We cut down plenty of trees. We need foreign buyers of that product. If you want a decent forestry industry here in the United States, it's not just a matter of our own consumption of the timber. It's the foreign buyers of the timber as well. And if you don't have buyers of that timber, the price of logs falls. Our logging companies that are here in the United States, they suffer the consequences from that. It's not just about the lumber, all right? To understand that we have a domestic supply of most building supplies that are produced right here in the United States. We're not dependent upon anybody for it. Do they produce stuff that comes into the United States that we can consume and help actually keep the prices somewhat stable and the supply stable? Yeah, that exists, absolutely. We buy all kinds of building supplies from outside the nation, but the majority of it comes from right here. Right? This is the internalization of this information that we really need to think about. Nobody wants to internalize Triffin's dilemma. Nobody wants to explain what it is that the United States is going to do to try and get the dollars out there to the rest of the world when the rest of the world is going to demand dollars when the debts come due. Nobody seems to want to talk about that. Not a single article. I don't hear the administration talking about it. Nobody wants to bring that up. But they do want to talk about how unfair it is that all these nations have been taking advantage of the United States, even though they're sending us actual produced items from their labor, their energy, their environment, and we're exchanging for paper promises to pay into the future that are essentially superficial, empty paper promises because there's no way it's going to get paid, right? I mean, we'll promise to take out more debt and pay it, but there's no way that it's going to get paid, not outright. All right. Hit the like button, guys. Thank you, dishes. Plywood coming down. I have floors to replace. Plywood's a little bit different story, but I think that if you just kind of keep an eye on the building industry itself, like I do not think that lumber prices are going to get much cheaper, right, from here because they're already pretty low. The idea of the lumber futures price that has dropped dramatically right now is still another 6 weeks away or so from closing. It's a May contract, so it's like, it's still got a ways to go before it closes. The demand for lumber is very low, so the demand for plywood is also low. The production of it has been very much curtailed. And when you look at what it was that the plywood was selling for during like the peak of the pandemic height, like when it was $80 a sheet, you're down at like $25 a sheet for half-inch CDX 5-ply. You could probably get it cheaper in some locations. OSB is down around 20. I hear people can get it as cheap as 15. This is about as low as it's going to get. Like, I just don't see where it's going to get much cheaper. Could you save a few dollars? Yeah, probably. If you time it right, there might be a opportunity of savings inside of it. But considering that the demand is already low and that the production is low, like, I just don't see how it can get any cheaper from here. The moment that we get any kind of uptick in demand, which I don't see taking place yet, but if we did, right, the what if we did, then I just don't believe that there's enough supply within the industry to keep prices low. You would see them spike. To what extent, to how much, I guess it's anybody's guess to what level of demand actually we find going into the future. But I find that to be very subjective, right? Considering that nobody knows exactly what it is that's taking place, and even still don't know, right? Still don't know what these countries are going to negotiate. We don't know what level to what they're going to get. We get these percentages, but then again, they also have the opportunity to negotiate before they get impacted. What is it, on the 5th or something before we actually, so we still even haven't gotten them yet, right? They're still like, they're still happening in a few days yet. It's just like all this credible threats of flying through the economy right now is having a profound impact on people's decision making. And you think about it, if it's really all about elevating the inflation expectation, it's working. It totally works. Right? Most people don't think that the Fed and the government and everybody else is trying to elevate the inflation expectation. I'm literally like the only person who thinks this. Everybody else seems to think that they're trying to bring the inflation down. And I don't know why they would even consider that, except for the mainstream media propagandized information pushing everybody to believe that there's a 2% target, which is absolutely asinine. There is no 2% target. It's a flexible average inflation targeting over time, which means that they are looking in the long run for 2%. Meaning that there is times when inflation is running persistently below 2%, that they will have appropriate monetary policy seeking to achieve inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. That is the condition that we are now in today. You know, I mean, if you think about it, after the great financial crisis, the Federal Reserve adopted the 2% inflation target. They did it in 2012. Never once were they able to achieve it. Not once. Not one time where they're like, hey, we made it to 2% and then we're going to stick it out at 2% from now on. They never once ever did it. They hit 2% on the way by, right? On the way up or the way down. And most of the time they were under 2%. They are not able to maintain a 2% target, never have been. I don't know why people would consider it to be a possibility now. Like if you could prove any time in history where it existed that they were able to maintain a 2% target, I would say, okay, we can look at it and say there was a time when it happened. It's never occurred and it's never going to. But yet, I don't know, 99% of the people out there believe that the Fed has attempted to get to a 2% target. It's wrong. Everybody's got it wrong, right? And again, I'm able to call these things out as easily as I do, confident as I am with it because of the massive understanding that I have of monetary policy beyond everybody else. And I don't mean to sound arrogant or whatever about that, cocky. Okay? But the point being is that on this tab right here, I have countless amounts of speeches that I have gone over for the last 20 years that are explaining today why it is occurring the way it is. And ultimately, the Federal Reserve needed an elevated inflation expectation to deal with the fact that they were operating monetary policy at the lower bound of zero with a low neutral interest rate. It was failing them. They couldn't operate anymore. It was failing them. And with an elevated inflation expectation, they are regaining their monetary policy. They are gaining the ammunition. An elevated elevated Fed funds rate and an elevated neutral interest rate is what the Federal Reserve was looking for when the elevated inflation expectation is being pushed. They are looking for that. And they're getting it. And this is what blows me away, is that most people just don't see it. And I explained it so many times, and I thought, man, it's just going to be a matter of time before people will pick up on the idea of what it is that the Federal Reserve is truly attempting to do with this monetary policy, and I will just fade away into the background as people will then be able to explain the monetary policy in a much better way than I can, because I'm just the uneducated economist, but nobody picks up on it. Nobody picks up on the credible threat theory. And it's just like, okay, if I'm going to be the only one, then I'm going to keep coming out here and I'm going to keep reiterating it. Because if I could be as accurate as I am on lumber, then I know that other people in their industry, whether they're working in the automotive, working in steel, working in farming, working in whatever it is they're doing, if they could take on the understanding of macroeconomics and the monetary policy like I have and then incorporate that back into their industry, they will be so far ahead of the game. I don't know if people realize this, but a day job by far is the best economic indicator that you could ever possibly have. We are living it in real time. All these economists and market analysis and all these other dudes out there who are claiming that they understand economy and the markets and everything that's going on right now, they are waiting for us to live our lives so that they can read about it. We can see it in real time. Every day when we go into work, we know the phone calls, we know the customers, we know what's going on, but most of us don't have a macroeconomics view to understand what it is that we are seeing. Once you see it, you have it in firsthand, real-time view, way ahead of everybody else. And then people will call you crazy. They'll say, dude, you're a lunatic. Okay? Just like, how did the Supertramp say it in their song, right? They'll be calling you radical, liberal, right? They'll be calling you all kinds of different names, criminals. Here we are, on the cutting edge, delivering the information well ahead of everybody else, and people want to deny it. They say, dude, you don't know, man. You're just a little dude working in a little lumberyard in the middle of a little town in the Pacific Northwest. You have no clue of what's going on, and I accurately call it every single time. Every time. I don't miss it, because you can't see it the way I see it. There's nobody who can. Like, unless you're answering the phone, working a retail position, doing counter jockey, ringing up 2x4s and literally put them in the back of the truck, you cannot see what I'm seeing in real time. Oh, you can go and you can look at the information after it's already come out. You can listen to the people out there talk about how awesome it is and their little tiny micro view of what they see outside their door. But very few people are going to come out here and explain to you what it is that I am seeing, like the way I am seeing it from the position that I am in. Very few people have this. You know, there's guys out there who understand economics way better than me. There's people who understand the lumber industry better than me. There's people who understand retail better than me. There's people out there who can understand distribution and supply chains and everything else better than me. But nobody else has put it all together better than me. Okay? And again, I don't mean to be arrogant or bragging, but this just proves my point. All these people out there lost their minds over lumber tariffs and what was going to happen. Nothing. Nothing took place. Zero. Right? I mean, the lumber tariffs that were already on lumber that nobody cared about, that's still there. But future tariffs? No. Right? That was all hype, all credible threats, all getting people elevated inflation expectation to raise the neutral interest rate and regaining that ammunition for the Federal Reserve, making the economy less restricted. All those things took place. Right? Very much like I had described 2 years ago. Right? So, I mean, we can keep going with it. Like, you know, we can keep thinking about like, oh, well, all these other impacts. Let's talk about something that is not lumber. Let's talk about all these other things, you know? Go for it. I'm not an expert in copper, right? I'm not even an expert in lumber. I just happen to see it better than anybody else. If you want to call me an expert, so be it. I don't call myself an expert. I do retail sales for a living. Right? Like, how many people out there who can see it in real time as well as I can unless you have a retail sales job? You can't. You don't know what the phone calls are. You don't know what's going on. Not until the information comes out and you see it. 30 days has gone by. What does the data say? Right? Oh, well, I already lived that stuff. I'm on to the new one. All right, moving on. Trump is going to zero out of the debt. Going to zero out of the debt. Okay. Blooding Occam's razor. We know he loves a grift. He's shorting the market before tariffs, then take bribes, cover the shorts, and go long the delay, then delay the tariffs. Oh, yeah, I mean, like, I used to be a conspiracy-minded person that, like, I would have totally fallen into something like that. Okay. I got a couple 100 miles on the tranny. I just did my Scion XB. I'll call it good to go. Right on, Wayne. Yeah, the transmission in that damn Ford Escape I have, that's a bummer. Okay, moving on. Persistence over resistance podcast. You don't need to pay back the debt. You just need to roll it over. The debt to GDP ratio is all that matters. I would agree on a lot of that. I mean, as far as carrying on into the future, I mean, I think it does matter at some point, but yeah. So would you still recommend just continuing investing in index funds? Did I ever recommend that? I don't know if I've ever recommended that. I don't think I really recommend stock investing in general. I've talked about what I've done, right? But I don't like, and I recommend dollar cost averaging if you're going to do it, but I'd never talked about where you put your money. Yeah, like, I mean, I didn't say like put it in this particular stock or that thing. I've talked about what I've done, and maybe people have followed into that. But even still, like, I just sold out of a bunch of stock a couple of days, well, 2 weeks, a week and a half ago. I sold, all my position in Altria. I sold out of my Russell 1000 ETF Vanguard growth stock. I sold out of that position, sold out of ExxonMobil. I sold out of all those positions. But it wasn't because I was worried about the stock market. It was because I was going to use the money to get out of debt. Because I have accumulated some debts that I thought I was going to have knocked out by the end of 2024. It didn't happen. So I'm going to take care of that now, get that out of my way so that I don't have these debts. But that's the reason why I sold the stock. It wasn't because of like worried about the stock market crashing or something of that nature. Good timing, but it just happened to be coincidental, So you pick what you do, man. I mean, that's not me to suggest, right? I just suggest that if you're going to do it, to dollar cost average in. That's the only thing I recommend, because that's what I do, right? All right, Aaron, is there a possibility that the U.S. attempts to become a tech specialist manufacturer, like a tech hub of some sort? I don't believe so, Aaron. I believe in the idea of Triffin's dilemma. And that understanding that Triffin's dilemma is having a problem. The United States has to figure out a way to export dollars. We got to figure out a way to get the dollars out of the United States and into the hands of the world. And the best way to do that is deficit trades. Trade deficit, meaning importing more stuff than you export. And by importing stuff and exporting dollars, you're able to supply the world with the dollars that they need. In fact, you know what a best way to do it? You don't even have to buy stuff. You got all your stuff that you're buying anyway. What you do is you scream tariffs, 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 and then when they do a counter tariff on you, you just remove the tariffs that you were going to do, and they can leave the counter tariffs in place, and then you export even more money. I'm not saying that's happening. I'm just saying that could happen. And if you wanted to get dollars out of the United States, and you couldn't increase necessarily the trade deficit, because that's really kind of a bummer for you, you could increase the ability to get money out of the country just by simply having the foreign buyers or the foreign nations put extra tariffs on your sales, right? And then just remove the tariffs that you had going. And then you'll get all the money out of you'll export all that money. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying that could happen. If you think about Triffin's dilemma and the issues that they have from it, that could be a very likely road that they go down. But we'll find out and see. Trump is just getting started and mofo's in line. Okay, whatever. I mean, he was just getting started with the whole lumber tariffs, 25% tariffs across the board, guaranteed, no chance of dismissal or whatever exemptions, and boom, lumber's exempted. Oh, oops. Not, except for that one. Right? Simon, U.S., EU, China, Russia have become more aggressive in the last few years. Do you see any more conflicts occurring? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I see conflicts. The economy is based off of conflict. You think about it, like if you want to look at the economy in the most primitive form, right? Then really, if you think about what the way that Cantillon had described it in his essay about, like, I mean, he referred to them as savages, right? Because, it's an old book and it's like out of date. But, the Native Americans here, when the Americas were first discovered and people were figuring out what was going on over on this side, the Native Americans were living off the land, right? So it's only so many people could live on the land because the land can only support so many people, right? I mean, you got to eat and the land can only produce so much food. So if you are a hunter-gatherer and you have a huge population, there's not going to be enough food and you're going to battle over hunting grounds. That is essentially like the basis of economics, right? Is to think that it's about food and it's about survival, right? And so when you have a limited amount of food and you have a population out there that is exceeding the amount that the food can provide for, then you're going to have conflicts. You're going to have battling, right? So now from there you can start making it complicated, right? Well, maybe we can add some agriculture to it and produce food. Well, now that you can produce food for everybody, you can have more people. Well, if you have more people, maybe you need some governance, right? And so goes the problem of it. So when you think about like conflict, yeah, definitely. Conflict is part of economics. It's like almost guaranteed, Simon, what do you think about how they calculated tariffs based on half of the trade deficit rate, which was super unexpected and not reciprocal? Dominic, I think that I think at this point right now, until we actually see what tariffs are implemented, right, it's a credible threat. So again, like a lot of these nations can go into negotiations. In fact, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I did say that. Hold on. Let me see if I saved the article. Um, Higher than expected tariffs, markets drop. Oh, that wasn't it. Okay. Oh, that wasn't it. Hold on one second here, guys. Maybe I can just... Oh, I don't have internet access on this. That's why it's not coming up. So if I remember right, I think it was Donald Trump's son who posted on X something about, like, the last country. I feel bad for the last country to negotiate with him. They're going to suffer the most, or something of that nature. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something along this nature. Like, the idea is like these countries still have room to negotiate before it's impacting them, right? And so I think about that. I'm like, okay, is that what this was all set up for? You get tariffed, and you get tariffed, and you get tariffed, and now who's going to come to me and work on deals, on business deals, to try and figure out what it is that we're going to do, or else you're going to get this tariff? Like, that's what I'm hearing. The clarity on tariffs, I'm still not there yet, right? Still not quite there. All right. Credible threat theory is probably one of the best helpers I've ever come across. Don't discredit this position. Thank you so much, Tonquin Park Villa. Thank you. I really appreciate that, because a lot of people have come to me now after studying and listening to the credible threat theory. They are coming to me going, man, at first I didn't get it. I wasn't quite following, wasn't jiving. But now, as time has gone on and I've internalized the credible threat theory, they are coming to me saying, dude, it is so accurate. It is so well understood by some of these people now that they cannot see it any other way, right? Very much like I can't see it any other way now. Like, I just literally cannot. Like, people are like, dude, think about this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, yeah, I have. My theory's stronger. My theory is still stronger. Like, I can explain that better than you can and argue that position better than you can, and I know that my theory is still right. Because I can actually explain the idea that people are telling me to, like, hey, you need to incorporate this particular idea or thought into it. And when I do, I can explain that thought and that debate better than they can, and then I can tear it apart with my credible threat theory. Every time. Like, almost every time. Like, not almost, every single time. Like, I've never met anybody who has internalized the credible threat theory and denied it and say, no, this isn't right. Everybody who has ever looked at it, looked at the information, internalized it, and said, dang, dude, this is by far the best explanation of what's going on that I've ever heard. And I thank you. And I thank them, right? And I'm like, cool. I mean, thank you for listening. That's it, man. And then they walk away with the credible threat theory, and then they come to me and they're like, dude, look, I'm seeing it all over the place now. And I'm like, I know, right? Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it everywhere. You recognize it everywhere. Let's see here. I get it, but I don't need to know their end game to really understand what their plans are. I don't really care what their plans are. I mean, I care, like, I care what the plans are, but I don't care because I have my own plans. And if I can recognize what it is that they're doing, yeah, I see how the separation between the rich and the poor occur, and I know it's going to continue going into the future. And now if somebody says, well, that's their plan, well, yeah, it's also kind of the economic force that is at play, and they're taking advantage of that. And most people don't know how to take advantage of it, and so they get left behind, and then they want to blame the people who do understand that it was their fault or something. And to me, I'm like, no, they just kind of got it, knew how to position themselves, and everybody else didn't know what was going on and were very hopeful, wishful thinkers, and they end up suffering the consequences from that. That's really what's going on, you know. I mean, just because they understand it and can take advantage of it doesn't necessarily mean that they planned it, right? Like, you know how to take advantage of good weather. What if it's raining and I show up with you know, with rain gear and prepared to deal with it, and people go like, oh man, this is your fault. Like, why? Because I'm comfortable working in the rain with my rain gear, and you didn't think about that, so now you suffer the consequences of having to be soaking wet and miserable, and that's somehow my fault. I don't get that. Understanding that the economic forces that are at play is going to create the inequality. It's going to continue. It's been going on for years, and there is no reversal of this. Like, it's not going to reverse. There's nothing you can do, right? Literally nothing. And in fact, when you think about it, the pain and misery that it would take in order to solve the problem would have to continue on for generations. So even if Trump was trying to fix the problem, it would literally take generations upon generations of this to actually fix the problem. There's nothing he can do in 4 years. There's nothing he could do in 8 years, right? It would literally take 80 years to fix the problem, because it took 80 years to get here. And there ain't no fixing it. There's no reversal. It's a crashing. That's how it expands and then it collapses. And that's it. And there is no like expand and then we get a little bit smaller and we expand again and we get, no, it doesn't work like that. It goes, and that's what happens. All right. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Ross Perot warned us. Jared, politics are a downstream of economics, distraction from the economics, in my opinion. Yeah, and I totally agree with you, all-nighter. I think there's economic forces that are playing out there that politics are reacting to. When you see them in their reaction mode, taking position, that is a symptom of the problem. That is the symptoms that are presenting themselves. The economic forces that are at play are going to continue going into the future, and the politics of it will be reacting to it in a way that people say, wow, this is your fault. You're creating this situation, but really ultimately they're reacting to it. Right? They're a symptom, not the problem. There is no problem. See, that's another thing. There is no problem. The problem is the way you positioned yourself. That's the problem. Right? And since most people don't know how to position themselves because they don't understand the economic forces that are out there, and instead they blame politics, they end up positioning themselves in a way that gets hurt because of the politics. Like, literally, they position themselves to have an outcome based on politics, and then it does, right? Then it impacts their life. So if you don't position yourself like that, but position yourself in accordance to economic forces that are out there, the politics of it have less of an impression on you, right? Very much like politics have no impression upon my lumber industry understanding, the understanding of lumber. Like, I do not, Biden, Trump, like all that stuff, very little importance, very little, right? And people say, oh, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, I've been doing it for 7 years. So yeah, I can. Right? Yeah, I can. And I'm really good at it too. So, other people who are not good at it can't tell me how to do it, because I know what I'm doing here when I talk about lumber, because I have been so accurate every single time here, putting out the videos on YouTube and documented, right? So I don't even have to go back and try to defend myself. You can just go back and look at the videos yourself. All right, what did I say? I stopped wearing raincoats long ago. Now I have 11-month-old. I said rain gear. Simon, do you believe the tariffs will be deflationary? I've seen some commentary they will be. Well, I actually kind of said something about that, didn't I? Like, hold this idea of creating a situation in which that you are trying to bring dollars back to the United States will deny the world the ability to acquire dollars to pay their debts. When those debts come due, the dollar strengthens dramatically, and the imports that are coming to the United States, that foreign production, gets cheaper. All right, so there is an argument for deflationary pressures coming from this. Yes, you know. Again, wait and see. Got to see what's going to happen, right? Do we hit them with tariffs? Do they hit us with tariffs? Do we back off? Right? What's exempt? What's going to be workaround? You know, we don't know, and the clarity has not been done yet. I still don't have clarity on it. Like, clarity is set in stone. Right? This is the way it's going to be. When I hear that there's room for negotiations and flexibility, yeah, that to me isn't clear. All right, what time is it? Ah, gosh, guys, it's already done. I can't believe how quickly we ran through this day. All right, 40 minutes into the live stream. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. But I have to go back to work, so clarity is what I needed to hear. And thank you. Yeah, I mean, you bet, guys. And again, I'm going to share everything that I know when it comes to what I see within the lumber industry right away with you guys. And, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding, and there's a lot of propaganda, right? Everything that you see on the mainstream media is propagandized information, almost guaranteed. It's like you can't even really use it as anything as far as an accurate depiction of what's going on. You can use that to try and say, hey, this is what they're talking about. You can use it as evidence of credible threats. You can use it in different ways, but you can't use it for information because it's all propaganda. Like, I have yet to find lumber articles that accurately describe what it is that's taking place within the industry. Some of them get real close. Like, even the professional ones, like even the ones that you would think, oh my gosh, this is like, you know, forest industry out of Canada or something like that. You know, some really good publication, but still it's not accurate to the monetary policy because 99% of the people don't get monetary policy accurate. Like, they think they do. And even worse, they think the Federal Reserve doesn't know what they're doing, which really means that they screwed up monetary policy in their own, like, the people's understanding of it. Yeah. All right, thank you, Gimp Gladdy. I really appreciate the $10. Would you be into going to Danny Potluck's Low Value Mail? It's an interview call and show in style of the Coast to Coast AM with comedy angle. I would love to do interviews. I love doing interviews. Like, anytime anybody has ever asked me for an interview, I said yes. I didn't care who they were. I didn't care how small their channel or how big their channel was. Anytime anybody has ever asked me for an interview, I say yes, right? Especially if it's like, you know, a Zoom meeting kind of interview. You bet, man, no problem. Just hit me up on email and we'll, you know, uneducatedeconomist@gmail.com, and we'll set up a time. And we'll break this stuff down. We'll explain credible threat theory to your fans, to your viewers, and, you know, so that they can internalize this and see it for themselves too. So that they can recognize that they don't have to panic about, you know, the lumber industry like everybody was panicking, assuming what was going on. We can see the credible threat theory way ahead of time, incorporate that into our strategies. You know, uneducated economist. You guys let me know.